It's pretty safe to say that the Oblivion Remaster was one of, if not the most insane game launches I've ever seen. I think I really started hearing rumors about an Oblivion Remaster earlier last year, and even though it was pretty legit and sounded so cool, I kinda kept my expectations low since I didn't want to be disappointed if it just never happened. This is one of my favorite games after all. But sure enough, after some huge leaks and a showcase on a seemingly random Tuesday, we were blessed with the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered. And let's just say, I don't think I've ever bought something so quickly in my entire life. Hell, I don't think I've ever even bought a game on day one, but I knew I had to play this. This game is basically all I've been doing ever since it came out, and as much as I'd love to do a proper review of the main story, DLCs, and faction quests, I'm still not exactly finished playing it yet, so perhaps a much bigger video will be on the way. But for now, I think there was one pretty big question that immediately popped in my mind when I first heard of a remaster. Will it still have the sauce? You know, the Oblivion sauce. By that I really just mean the style and charm of the original game, cause boy, it had a lot of it. Although most of the NPCs kind of look like potato sacks, and the game had some jank to it, you can't deny that it's still one of the most interesting, stylistic, and magical RPGs out there. Some people complain that Cyrodiil is way too bright and oversaturated, but I think it's kinda cool, honestly. I love how golden and green the world is, during the day at least. It's quite a sight after leaving the super dark sewers at the very beginning, and it's such a stark contrast to Oblivion itself. Yeah, the graphics might be a bit dated, but I've always been a fan of the world design in this game. Each city has its own defining features. Oblivion itself is a deliciously creepy yet badass looking place. The dungeons and caves, while a bit repetitive, still do a great job of making the player feel uneasy with tense music and an endless stone maze with creatures and traps lurking at every corner. The user interface and artwork of the original game is honestly one of my favorite parts, since it truly adds to the magical vibe by including fantasy-styled artwork and making your journal look like some kind of ancient scroll, an elder scroll even. The main story is amazing. I prefer it to Skyrim's, honestly.
What in Oblivion is that?
It's also just really funny, whether it's intentional, like this beautiful piece of artwork, or unintentional, like the riveting conversations NPCs have with one another and the player.
Take care.
Leave me alone.
I could go on and on about this game, but you get the point. Oblivion isn't perfect, there are parts I don't care for, but it's overall such a fantastic game with its own very unique charm. The bugs and awkward conversations are just a part of the magic. You either get it or you don't.
Do you ever wonder why things look better without their skin on?
Now, something I was certainly afraid of, like I mentioned earlier, is that the remaster would wipe away all the sauce the original game had. Like taking the highly stylized user interface and turning it into the boring black and white lists seen in Skyrim, or making the NPCs look hyper-realistic with no personality or life in them. I really just wanted it to still feel like Oblivion, not some weird realistic version of it that got turned into Skyrim or something. The showcase definitely had some promise, but I knew I could only get my questions answered by diving right into the game for myself. But to my delight, booting up the game, seeing the epic new main menu screen, and watching the intro made me feel the exact same way I did when I played the original. I do kind of wish Cyrodiil was brighter and more green, we'll get to that later, but as for the rest of the world, I think they did a fantastic job here. One thing I was pretty blown away by are the new Oblivion gates, and of course the hellish place itself. I was also super curious about how the painted world would look, which is a special area from one of my favorite quests, A Brush with Death. And this might be blasphemy to say, but I think I like it even more here than the original. I love how you can see the texture of a paint canvas on top of everything. And of course, the colors of the grass, trees, leaves, and sky are so bright and colorful, exactly like the original. It feels even more like being inside of a painting. The cities are also a pretty big high note. Cheydinhal, my goat, looks so gorgeous, and I love how the chapels in each city have glowing stained glass windows at nighttime. In terms of world design, it seems they stayed pretty true to the classic with better graphics and some artistic liberties that I think work really well. Speaking of graphics, I think many of us Oblivion heads wondered what the glorious NPCs would look like almost 20 years later. And in my opinion, I think they did a good job with redesigning them. The more main or important characters like the Emperor and Martin Septim look really good here, especially the Emperor because he looked a little silly in the OG. The NPCs are definitely better looking, I guess you could say, but I do think some of them are still lovably weird. They'll hit you with that fluoride stare just like the original, and are still very awkward in conversations with one another.
Uh-huh. Bye.
They've added some new voices in the game, which I think really helps to diversify the NPCs, and these new actors fit right in. They even left in this iconic goof from the original game.
On the same night. Wait a minute, let me do that one again.
And I absolutely love the fact that you can, more easily, make a good-looking character or an absolute abomination, just like the original. The combat, spell, and weapon animations, or design, I guess, have also really improved from the original. The combat in Oblivion looked and played fine, of course, but I love how much detail was added to the movement and magic in this game. It feels like your weapons just hit much harder, like you can really see the impact your attackers take from it. Makes me feel so much more powerful than the frantic sword swinging I did in the OG. And casting spells and using enchanted weapons, like my epic lightning staff or using flame, have so much more detail. The combat overall just plays and looks better in my opinion, and I guess kinda related to that, they've added running, which honestly feels like a pretty natural addition and makes a lot of sense. And I gotta say, I love the goofy animation. I've said this plenty of times by now, but I'm not a stickler for super good graphics. I honestly think the OG Oblivion still holds up well for the most part, but I do think this game just looks pretty damn nice. From the characters, the world, weapons, just about everything has gotten a really good facelift. The item that I think looks so much better now are the sweet rolls. I want to eat these so bad. I'm also happy that the persuasion and lockpicking minigames are, I think, basically the exact same. However, the leveling system has changed a bit from the original, which I know most people would say is for the better. Leveling up in the original game was always kind of confusing for me, but apparently there's a thing called the leveling problem, where you can accidentally screw yourself over by leveling up the quote-unquote wrong things, and making the game way too difficult as a result, which I'm pretty sure happened to me in my playthrough. But it seems in the remaster they've made some changes to this that will hopefully get rid of this problem. Now I think something a lot of you have been waiting for are my thoughts on the new user interface of the remaster, since I'm clearly the most qualified person to talk about this. Well, is it as stylized as the originals? No, not really. But I think it still retains a lot of the same design elements, and it's even easier to use now, so that's always a plus. The remaster's UI still sorta looks like scroll paper, thank goodness, and it still has a lot of the same artwork, icons, and font. While the OG main menu and loading screens were very iconic, I do love the new ones they have here too. Although it's not as close to the classic as I would have liked, it still looks aesthetically pleasing, and a hell of a lot better than Skyrim's. Although they borrowed quite a few things from that game, I'm very glad the UI design was not one of them. The bigger plus here is how much easier it is to use. I like how you can see the details about every single item in the game, and even having the 3D model to really get a closer look. Instead of selecting the icons at the bottom of your journal, they are now very clearly named at the top of your screen. Although I do like clicking those little icons, I think having these screens split up is actually a great idea. Like now, instead of the map being on a small part of the journal, which is already kind of small to begin with, it now has its own menu where it takes up the whole screen and you can finally zoom in and out and easily move around. And they've even added a weapon wheel, which, like running, is a very welcome addition. So while it may not be as fantastical as the originals, it's definitely more practical. And I do appreciate that they clearly put effort into making the design pretty similar to the OG, instead of just stripping it down into colorless, artless menus. Something I've mentioned a few times by now is Oblivion being janky. By that I really just mean the overall goofiness and silliness of the game.
How are you today?
Like how high you can jump in the air when your acrobatics is way leveled up, which is very easy to do, how absolutely OP skooma is, or how adding bread into Salmo the Baker's inventory makes the game crash entirely. I know jank is supposed to be a bad thing, but I don't know, I think these elements are just a part of the game's charm, the sauce, you know? And this game kinda plays into it. Apparently you can no longer do the iconic backflip, which is a shame, but the easy grind to leveling up acrobatics is still in the the game. Consuming skooma makes you go beast mode just like the original, and there's still plenty of funny Bethesda zoom moments in this game. I like how if you jump up right before talking to someone, you get this very nice angle. The game's pretty polished for the most part, but they seem to play into the jank a bit, and I like that. I think this game would be incredibly boring and probably a bad remaster if it got rid of these things. Although they did get rid of that giant guard in the intro. RIP to the real champion of Cyrodiil. I've spent a lot of time praising the remaster, but of course I do have some complaints. Surprisingly, I haven't experienced any crashes, but I did have some technical issues at the beginning that I had to fix. I haven't seen too many bugs, though I guess it would make it closer to the OG. The one bug I've really seen are NPCs just randomly not having any clothes on, but I personally haven't experienced any crazy or game-breaking ones, so that's always good. While I still like the UI and I think it's good overall, it's not as stylized as I hoped it would be, but it's not really too big of a deal. One of the biggest problems I have, which I've already mentioned, is how brown and desaturated Cyrodiil looks. Yeah, maybe it was a tad too bright in the original, but I honestly think those vibrant colors played into the fantasy of the Elder Scrolls, like this magical, almost dreamlike world extremely different from our own. Now don't get me wrong, I still think Oblivion, the cities, and the interiors of buildings, dungeons, and ruins still look phenomenal, but the world of Cyrodiil as a whole could have used a little more color and brightness. Also, the door to the Dark Brotherhood was not as red and glowy as the original, which, like the world, was a bit disappointing and kind of broke the immersion, and apparently has 2 extra children on it, which is technically lore inaccurate. Once again, I guess these are kind of non-issues, but damn it, modern games should not be so afraid of color. But as far as complaints go, I honestly think that's about it. I'm really enjoying the remaster of Oblivion so far. As someone who loves the original game, it really met and even exceeded a lot of my expectations. The exhilaration I felt seeing the leaks and then watching the Bethesda showcase where they dropped the game that same day is something I'll never forget. Todd, you've done it again. I got addicted to Oblivion back when I first played it, and safe to say, I'm addicted to it all over again. I know some may argue that Oblivion never really needed to be remade, and I actually don't fully disagree with that, but this really does feel like a faithful and passionate remaster, and it breathes such new life into the game and the series as a whole. It's also the perfect opportunity for people who have never played Oblivion to finally give it a try in a much more modern and optimized way. Of course, I still think the original game is very much worth playing, but the remaster is a little easier on the eyes and has some cool improvements that more modern gamers would appreciate. It's also just nice seeing more Oblivion content on YouTube and other platforms. I'm eating it right up. I think there's one final question I need to ask before we end things here. Does the remaster still have the sauce? And after some careful consideration and hours of important research, I'd say yeah. It'll never take the place of classic Oblivion, but this remaster has me and so many other people out there getting to explore Cyrodiil again in a whole new way, and a lot of people are finally trying it for the very first time. And if you are, I just want to say, I hope you enjoy this magical, fun, and downright saucy game.